นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Let me tell you how I met Ajahn Chah. I believe these are some of the most powerful words you can hear. And I realized this a few months ago in my monastery. There were some regular lay people who came visiting, and I asked them one by one, how did you first get interested in Buddhism? And each one shared a brief story of how they first got interested. And then it got to this Australian man's turn, and he's about 60 years old. And from past experience, I thought, oh no, he's going to go on talking for a long time like he usually does. So I hesitated, but I asked him anyway. And sure enough, he starts way back in time. When I was 17 years old, and I read my first Buddhist book on Tibetan Lama reincarnation. And he went to India, then to Gaia, and then something about a hotel room, and $100 he'd left or forgotten under his pillow. Details like this, on and on. And you could feel the room sinking into drowsiness, and people's minds wandering, and irritation starting to build up a bit. Then he says, I went to Thailand. I stayed a month at Wat Banana Chat. And from there, I went with some of the monks to Wat Nong Papong. And then he said, I met Ajahn Chah. And at that moment, the room woke up. Any irritation was gone, and there was genuine interest. And people leaned forward, listening closely to how he shared a short story of how he paid respects to Ajahn Chah and chanted and meditated there with the other monks. And a short story like that just seems so precious. And so I told him, next time, start with, let me tell you how I met Ajahn Chah. So after this, I went to read this book. And this book contains interviews of disciples of Ajahn Chah compiled together. And the first question they ask is, how did you meet Ajahn Chah? And reading each of these stories, it was so uplifting, and each story was a very precious story to read. There was Lumpur Liam, who, when he first ordained as a young monk, started to learn the theory, but he was displeased with this, and he searched for a teacher. He traveled to Ubon Ratchathani and heard of a revered teacher called Ajahn Chah. He went to the monastery, and not intending to stay there, he ended up staying there, practicing, and we know the rest of the story. Lumpur Chandi, who gave a talk earlier, he grew up close to Wat Nong Papong, and his father would go often to there and come back home and share all the good stories and the great conduct of Ajahn Chah to his family. And later on, Lumpur Chandi himself went to Wat Nong Papong got his own faith and listened to the Dhamma talks of Ajahn Chah regularly. Luang Por Sawang, he was 11 years old when he was a temple boy, and Ajahn Chah came and stayed at that temple for one night, and he said from there he got this reverence and a warmth from there ever since 11 years old. Luang Por Wichit, who heard on the radio a live talk of Ajahn Chah saying, the mind is like something dirty. If you want it clean, you need to wipe dust, clean away the dirt, and then the cleanliness you want will arise. Where there is dirtiness, there is cleanliness. From here, he heard this teaching. The next day, he went to Wat Nong Papong to pay respects to Ajahn Chah and to hear more teachings. Luang Por Sopon, as a young boy, he enjoyed boxing. He wanted to ordain temporarily to repay the gratitude of his parents, but he wanted to ordain with an arahant, and he believed that all arahants can read minds. So he went to Wat Nong Papong, believing that Ajahn Chah is an arahant, and he said, Ajahn Chah, the first thing he asked me was, do you want to be a monk or a boxer? And he said, it felt like I got hit in the face. Luang Por Paitun, he went to Wat Nong Papong and was so impressed by how quiet the forest is and how clean everything was, how well swept the paths and everything was. And he compared it to his home, which was unbearable because it was so dirty and so noisy with all the animals and children. So he decided to go back home and ask permission from his mother to ordain. Luang Por Bunmi, who learnt many years as a monk the theory, the Pali, the scriptures, and went to Ajahn Chah to ask a question about meditation. And Ajahn Chah said, you have to answer that yourself. It's like I'm eating a mango, sitting here eating a mango, and you're asking me, is it delicious? Only if you eat it yourself, you will know how delicious it is. And from there, he asked for his layperson to ask an offering, flower offering tray, and he offered himself up to Ajahn Chah right then. Luang Por Anand, or Venerable Ajahn Anand, who had a branch monastery of Ajahn Chah near his workplace that he would go to regularly. And he had a monk that he really respected then, and this monk would take him to Wat Nong Papong, like on the time of Ajahn Chah's birthday, and he'd witness 500 monks gathering there and got faith. Ajahn Siripanyo, you know him, who had his hopes up high of meeting Ajahn Chah, and when seeing Ajahn Chah was bedridden and taken out on a wheelchair, his heart dropped because he thought, oh, if this is the highest state, what about me? But later realizing that this is completely in line with Ajahn Chah's teaching of impermanence, and the decay of conditioned phenomena. Each of these stories, reading them, was so uplifting. It felt like the purity and the great practice of Ajahn Chah was shining brightly, radiating out, and kind of calling on those with good eyes and wisdom to come and see and to find what their heart had been searching for in this life. But reading these stories, I thought, oh, what about me then? I didn't get a chance to meet Ajahn Chah. When I was in university in Sydney, my mother, who's here, opened up a Buddhist meditation center and invited many Western monks, including disciples of Ajahn Chah, and to give talks in the center. But back then, I was not interested in Buddhism. I felt like, oh, I've studied hard enough in high school, I'm going to enjoy my university life. But being the oldest and only son, my mum forced me to drive the monks around. So I had to drive them to the center, and they stayed in my apartment for like a week at a time. But still, I wasn't interested yet. It was only later when my friend, university friend, he asked me to go to a weekend meditation retreat, to which I thought, that sounds like a waste of a weekend. But he convinced me to go, and so I went. On this retreat, I got a sense or feeling of, oh, this is what it feels like to have a peaceful mind. But more importantly, I made a vow to keep Sila, the 5 precepts, and to meditate every day. Then about a month and a half in, I was sitting meditation, and an insight into impermanence of life and wealth arose. A dispassion, a weariness with the world came up, along with the desire to ordain. I knew I wanted to ordain, but I didn't know where to go. So I told my mother, I want to ordain, which she answered with are you serious? After finding out I was, then she took me to Tan Chao Kun Mahasamai, who's a senior Thai Dhammadutta monk in Sydney. And Chao Kun Samai, he thought about it for a while and said, go to Venerable Ajahn Anand, a disciple of Ajahn Chah in Wat Mapjan, Thailand. I didn't know who this was or where this was, but something felt like it was the right way to go. I realized much later on that this is the great kindness, the great compassion of these great teachers with purity and good conduct and disciples of Ajahn Chah who had spread the Dhamma overseas even before we were interested. And it was like planting the seeds. When they were ready, they would ripen, and we would receive the benefits in our hearts. So I was then 25 years old in Wat Mapjan, Thailand, under my teacher, Venerable Ajahn Anand, newly ordained. First time I was staying in a monastery in Thailand. I'd given up everything in Australia, which I'd lived since birth. My feeling back then was, I'm never going to go back to Australia this lifetime. And everything was new to me then. Being a monk, the monks around me, the teacher, the monastery, the environment, the food, and the language. Back then, I couldn't even say Sawadee Krap, which in Thai means hello. I was starting completely from scratch. But I remember back then I had a really strong desire to learn Thai because I wanted to be able to talk and understand my teacher, but also so I could listen to the recorded Dhamma talks of Venerable Ajahn Chah. So I began by listening and learning Thai when Ajahn Anan would give his regular Dhamma talks. And I realized that almost every talk he gives, there's a mention of Ajahn Chah. Whether it's a story from that time or a teaching. And so every time I heard those words, when I was with Ajahn Chah, or in the time of Ajahn Chah, or Ajahn Chah taught, I remember my mind would be uplifted and very intent and eager to listen to that Dhamma. And so this was like, in a way, I felt I didn't get a chance to meet Ajahn Chah, but I always felt like he was there. After listening so many years to these teachings by my teacher, Ajahn Anan, and I realized, or I really felt like this firm faith, love and reverence in the heart of Ajahn Anan, a direct disciple of Ajahn Chah. And Ajahn Anan would teach and share these stories, these teachings to his disciples, to us. And we would gain that same faith, love and reverence in Ajahn Chah. It was passed to us. And I think maybe during these few days, you can kind of feel it just by seeing this Sangha of Ajahn Chah's, hearing the teachings and stories. You feel some joy and you feel closer to Ajahn Chah. And what stories and teachings do you remember over these past 2 days? Maybe the teaching that Lumpur Liam was giving, talking about we have to adjust our minds to accept nature, and then the part of the Dhamma seat falls down, and he continues on like if that's the most normal thing in the world. Maybe Lumpur Damrong Suchito, who talked about the power of patient endurance, Khanti, how this was a fundamental teaching of Ajahn Chah and that he led his disciples to develop it. But he said it was something that Ajahn Chah couldn't give you, but you must develop it yourself. Maybe from Lumpur Piak, who talked about when Ajahn Chah looked at the Uposatha hall and said that if there's just one noble being arising in this world, then the Buddha Sasana will prosper, will last for a long time. Maybe Lumpur Pasano, who had an auspicious dream of Ajahn Chah coming to him the night or the day before the beginning of this ceremony. Who else? Maybe you remember more than me. or Lumpur Damrong today, who said one Dhamma sharing of Ajahn Chah, saying that the amount of people being born into this world is exactly the amount of people that will die. There's no cure for death. And that's why we have to practice. So a recommendation for you after this event, you can gather together in your organizations or with your Kalyanamitta, your good friends, old and new, and discuss about their teachings and the stories that you found important, that you've received over these 2 days. And there's one story that Venerable Ajahn Anand would tell very often about his time, or during his time in Wat Nong Papong with Ajahn Chah. And that was that the night before, the monks had been drinking this coffee, and they'd left out the flasks around the eating hall, and they hadn't cleaned it up, packed it away. And the next morning, Ajahn Chah comes, sees this, and takes his walking cane and smacks one of the flasks, and it tumbles rolling, making a loud sound. And all the monks are startled. And Ajahn Chah says, the monks know how to drink, but don't know how to pack it up. And the amazing part of the story is that apparently he walked a few more steps, sat down at his seat, and talked to the lay people with his usual good humor, good mood, with no lingering mood or anger. And Ajahn Anand said, but the monks, we lost our appetite that day. For the only meal of the day, the mood was lingering like that. So this is pointing at someone who's developed their mind, a mind as separate to its moods and emotions, no lingering trace of the moods there, just arising and passing. Someone who's trained the mind. And it reminds me of a simile that the Buddha gave, and that was that there's 3 people you can find in this world. The first is the person like a line drawn in stone. And this is someone who gets angry often, and it lasts a long time. A normal person. Second person is like a line drawn in sand. They get angry, but it doesn't last long. The third is like a line drawn in water. It vanishes right away. And the simile of this is, it's like someone who's talked to harshly, but responds with kindness and no anger. And this one symbolizes Ajahn Chah in this story for me. He could teach appropriately for the situation, but with no mood, lingering, no anger. It was purely for the benefit of the receiver. I remember later on, Venerable Ajahn Anand was visiting Australia in Bodhisattva, and he was in front of the bookshelf, and he picked up that book that I said earlier about, the one that compiled the interviews of Ajahn Chah's disciples. And another one of the questions was, what is the most memorable experience you have of Ajahn Chah? And so Ajahn Anand picked up this book, he read it, and I was sitting there quietly. And then he, with a very proud look on his face, he says, oh, there's other monks who remember that exact same story of Ajahn Chah hitting his cane, hitting the flask with his cane. They remember it as well. Then he said, oh, that's the special power of Ajahn Chah. He could teach and would enter deeply into someone's heart, and they wouldn't forget that teaching for a long time. And that flask incident was probably 50 years ago, and Ajahn Nan talks about it like it was yesterday. And so, that's the power that Ajahn Chah had. It was almost like he would teach, and that teaching would be embedded in the mind of the receiver, almost like that cane hitting that flask for them to remember and also pass on to the next generation, to inspire, to teach them, to guide us. So we can also learn from it, and we are also then taught by Ajahn Chah. There was a guy who came recently, and it's a young man, and he just got interested in this Ajahn Chah tradition, and he's now reading and listening to all these talks from the disciples of Ajahn Chah. And he comes to me and says, Ajahn, I feel like for me to really learn, I need to be kicked in the chest in the same way that Ajahn Chah kicked Ajahn Varadhammo in the chest. And we know that Ajahn Varadhammo is not so well and he couldn't be here today. So I asked permission just to share it briefly so you can understand what this young man meant. So the story was that Ajahn Varadhammo was in a bad mood or upset about some of the words of another monk. And as he gets back from alms round to the monastery, Ajahn Chah gives him a good morning in English. And from that, he feels so delighted and happy all day. And then in the evening, he's offering a foot massage to his teacher, Ajahn Chah, so happy, joyous. And suddenly Ajahn Chah kicks him in the chest. He falls flat on his back. And Ajahn Chah says, see, someone says something you don't like, and you grumble on and on. Another monk says, good morning, and you're delighted all day. Don't get lost in the words of others. Watch your own mind. So this is the teaching that Ajahn Chah gave. And that man who said that he needs to be kicked in the chest, it meant that he meant that when I get caught in my likes and dislikes, I feel like I can't get out of it. And so I need to be reminded by being kicked. And I told him, you don't need to be kicked in the chest. Ajahn Varadhammo received that teaching for you, and he shared that, passed it down to you so you could learn from that. In the same way that the Buddha gave teachings to monks and lay people about their own mistakes or shortcomings and how to overcome it. And that teaching has been passed down to us, and we can learn from that without making the same mistakes and use that teaching for our own benefit. So we get the benefit from that time. So I said, when you get caught into liking and disliking, you just need to have your own mindfulness and wisdom come up as best you can. And that is meant to remind you, kick you, so that you can get out of it, or you can learn from it. Because right there, with liking and disliking, that will be the cause for your suffering, or that's where you'll find it. And if you don't, not aware there, then you will suffer. Back in the early days of Bodhisattva, my monastery, we were 3 monks, and we had this desire to bring the Ajahn Chah tradition to Australia, to Sydney. And we wanted, as best we could, to follow the teachings, the tradition we'd learned from Wat Mapjan, the tradition of Ajahn Chah. And so we were discussing then, should we go for alms round to the local village or town, group of houses there, about 20 minutes walk away. And we were talking, why go? It's going to be cold, go bare feet. People aren't going to give anyway. We got to keep doing it. We're getting food anyway in the monastery. So we were moving to, why bother? Then we talked about Ajahn Chah going for alms round, first time in England, and also Ajahn Chah saying that monks go for alms round for people, not for food. And we talked about that first alms round that Ajahn Chah went and wrote in his journal, and I think you have a picture there in the exhibition hall. And in that journal, Ajahn Chah says that I went alms round, I received some rice, 2 apples, 2 bananas, 2 carrots, 2 sweets, and a cucumber. And monks before had never gone alms round because they had been too ashamed to go. But I only find actions that are evil or incorrect to be shameful. And that is in line with the Buddha's meaning of the term. Meaning Ajahn Chah understood the Dhamma. He would not be ashamed to do something in line with the Dhamma. And for me, myself, I really like this teaching because living in a non-Buddhist country, being the minority, then if our actions are not evil or incorrect, then we have no need to be ashamed to do it. So the next day, we decided to go for alms round. We went for alms and got nothing. Went the next day and got nothing. Went the whole week and got nothing. We finally got 2 large tins of tomato paste, 5 kilograms of it. And the monks went to eat that, and I couldn't eat tomato for weeks after that. But when we really saw the benefit of going for alms was when we first asked for building permission for all the buildings in the monastery. And in Sydney, the building permission is very difficult because the council is so strict and there's so many laws and building regulations. And for religious organizations, the hardest is the neighborhood consent. Our council is 60,000 people, and everyone can have a say whether they have an objection. But not a single objection. Why? Because the monks had gone alms round, they got nothing. What harm could someone going bare feet, walking like that, do? And this came from our faith. Hearing that teaching that was for someone else. and we went against our likes and dislikes, took up that teaching, practiced it, and we got the benefit from it. And if I can add to that, later on we had a Thai monk, and we had to leave him alone in the monastery for a little while. And before we left, we said, make sure you go an arms round, okay, by yourself. And he said, a cup. In Thai, cup can mean yes or no, depending on the situation. So we got back and he told me, I really didn't want to go. I was too scared to go for arms round. But I saw the picture of Ajahn Chah. It's the same picture you have, the main one in the exhibition, where Ajahn Chah has standing with a cane with all this metta, kindness. And he said, Ajahn Chah told me to go. So I went, and there was a police car following me for a little while slowly, and so I felt so safe. And I want to talk a bit about this Barami of Ajahn Chah. Barami translates to spiritual perfection or spiritual accumulations. But in Thailand, they kind of use it in a way that Ajahn Chah, he's still there. His virtues are still there. Or maybe he really is still there. I didn't really understand what this meant until after I organized this Sima ceremony that I held in my monastery in Bodhisattva in April of this year. And a Sima it requires usually a lot of monks, and to do a formal Sangha transaction or meeting where we establish a boundary or a Sima, and it's usually around a hall. And inside then this boundary, we can do ceremonies like ordinations of monks, bhikkhus, properly. And so it was January 16th of this year. We were at the Ajahn Chah Memorial in Thailand, Ubon, in Wat Nong Papong, and we began preparing for the event by inviting all these monks to come to the ceremony in April. And Ajahn Anan was inviting all the monks, and he wanted to have a representative from most of the Ajahn Chah branch monasteries from around Thailand, from most of the 76 provinces of Thailand. And so we invited some very senior, well-known, well-respected monks, some more junior monks, and some who had never been outside of Thailand before. And before I went back to Sydney to start preparing, Ajahn Anan told me, make sure to look after the monks as best you can. And I said, cup. But this is a cup of, I really will do my best. And so I had this intent that I really wanted for everything to go well and to fulfill the wishes of my teacher and to look after the monks as best we could. So I went back, and then getting to March, a month and a half maybe before the event started. And I remember thinking every day, there's not enough time. I just don't have enough time. I need more time. And I realized why. Usually these ceremonies, they prepare for like a year. not 3 months. Then in March, the third week of March, Lumpur Liam happened to be visiting us. And he was a bit worried about us because we didn't even know yet how we're going to bury these Sema stones. And didn't know how we're going to bury these Sema stones or what we're going to do with the visas and things, or they hadn't finalized, first. And so Lumpur Liam as well hadn't accepted the invitation to come back in a few weeks. But then in the first week of April, then the monks, I came back from a short trip to Thailand for my teacher's birthday, along with 13 other monks, heads of Ajahn Chah branch monasteries, and other monks that Ajahn Anan had sent to help out, to set up. And I remember all the monks got to work immediately, doing it with their full heart and in harmony, and each monk had a duty that was really crucial to setting everything up properly. And then when all the monks came there, the rest of them invited, they didn't need to be told what to do. Everyone knew what to do. All the Sangha duties were completed very well to the standard of this Ajahn Chah Sangha. And in the end, the monks, Ajahn Nan was satisfied and happy. We had 89 monks come, including Lumpur Liam, 14 monks ordained in a royal ceremony, more than 50 people staying, practicing 4 days in the monastery, and more than 1,500 people coming for the day. And a lot of people, including monks, said that it felt like Ajahn Chah's parami was there. And I realized that Ajahn Anan was wanting to offer this to promote Ajahn Chah's parami in Thailand and to bring that to Australia. And I realized that it required, to build that parami, it required us to sacrifice, to really have that effort and determination to offer this up to our teacher by promoting the harmony within the Sangha of Ajahn Chah, by practicing according to the teachings, the practices of Ajahn Chah, the standards he'd set. And this would bring up the faith of all the laity who would witness this. And this faith of the lay people, this faith within our hearts of Ajahn Chah is the parami of Ajahn Chah. It's Ajahn Chah in our hearts. And I think as well for this event, you can see this. It required an intention coming from a faith from the heart of one who has this great faith in Ajahn Chah, wanting to promote that parami of Ajahn Chah and bring that here to Malaysia, so that it would be of great benefit, merit, and would bring up the faith of the people now and into the future. And if I could add that after this Sema ceremony, I was very happy that it went well. But a part of me thought, let's not do that again. It was just that much work. And so another recommendation would be, after this event is finished, you can give your sincere words of appreciation to the organizers, the volunteers, the supporters, just of the benefit you've received from this event. Just giving them support, encouragement, and inspiration. And that's a very good way as well for us to recollect at all this goodness that we've received over this time. We can remember the teachings we've received, the stories we've heard, and give us inspiration to keep going in our practice. And remember the good deeds that you've done over this time, whether it's giving alms, food, listening to Dhamma talks, paying respects, giving respect, doing chanting with the monks, all these, or maybe the volunteers, or the help that you've done, remembering that so it's a source of your joy, happiness, and merit in the heart. And after this event, with this faith in your heart, faith in Ajahn Chah and his way of practice, then you cultivate that, give it inspiration in your heart to keep going on this path as your path to Nibbana. So let me finish with this story then. Sadhu is right though. When I was in Wat Mapjan, and it was the day before the Katina ceremony, and it was a big event. But the day before, there was many lay people there, and it was in the guest receiving area, and Ajahn was giving some teachings to about 40 lay people. There's a group from Malaysia here as well. And a group of 10 monks come, and they, from another tradition outside of Thailand, and they pay their respects to Ajahn. So Ajahn asks them, how's the practice? And the senior monk answers how they practice. So it starts explaining from all the steps of anapanasati, and then all the steps of the contemplation of the body, and then goes like this for 20 minutes. And Ajahn is sitting there patiently, and I'm thinking, or at least I'm getting irritated, it's kind of rude, you're doing this, like there's all these guests and they're from overseas. Ajahn knows this practice. So they keep going like this, and Ajahn Anand just says, or just asks once, when do you let go of your self-identity view? And they said, wait, I need to explain the steps of paticca samuppada, dependent origination first. He keeps going, explaining. And then after they're finished, then they pay respects to Ajahn Anand, and they take their leave because they need to see another teacher. And they leave, and Ajahn Anand has a very genuine smile and says, oh, thank you, please come again and let's discuss further next time. And after they leave, Ajahn Anand turns to the group there and asks, which method, or what do you think, which method do you like? This or Ajahn Chah's method? And they answered, oh, that method sounds very complicated. The monk even forgot where he was at one point and had to ask the other monk to remind him. And Ajahn Anand says, there's many ways to Nibbana. That is one way. Ajahn Chah's is another way. And he picked up the book in front of him and said, if it's heavy, then put it down. Just this much. If there is attachment, then let it go. So on the occasion of the final Dhamma talk of this Ajahn Chah Remembrance Day ceremony, to meet Ajahn Chah is a blessing, to meet the disciples of Ajahn Chah is a blessing, to gain faith in Ajahn Chah is a blessing, to meet the teachings of Ajahn Chah is a blessing. To be able to practice by the teachings of Ajahn Chah is a blessing. To be able to offer to Ajahn Chah is a blessing. And to have the firm faith in the ways and practices of Ajahn Chah, that it is fully in line with the teachings of the Buddha, and that it is surely our path to Nibbana, is a blessing. By all these blessings, may they live deep in your hearts for a very long time, giving you inspiration to continue on this path of practice, so you may keep cultivating your minds all the way till Nibbana, the end of all suffering of the round of birth and death.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.